more insight into this, let's talk to Victor Gao Chair Professor at Soochow University. Victor, welcome to Global Watch. First of all, let's take a look at the US attitude towards Japan's dumping wastewater into the sea. It's supported. Blinken actually said thanks Japan for the transparency it conducted during the process of releasing this information, and also supported Japan's decision to dump the wastewater treated by still radioactive water into the sea. But we also know that FDC of the US officially banned a lot of Japanese foods because of the radionuclide contamination. So are we seeing double standard here? Do you think it's fair? Because the US actually, at the meantime, have been criticizing many developing countries for pollution, for the less efforts on climate change tackling, etc., without any substantial proof, actually. Do you see it being fair?
First of all, thank you very much. You are raising a very important question. Allow me to make several points very quickly. First of all, the United States, regardless of its decision, is not all the stakeholders involved, because the Japanese government's decision to dump the wastewater into the Pacific Ocean is probably the worst decision Japan has ever made. And it will have far-reaching consequences involving many countries. And the United States is one of the stakeholders, but definitely not all the stakeholders. All the littoral countries around the rim of the Pacific Ocean are direct stakeholders. And because the seawater moves around very rapidly, it may actually move from the Pacific Ocean into the Indian Ocean on the one hand, and into the Atlantic Ocean on the other hand. So you are talking about potential far-reaching, long-term contamination of the global ocean system.
Including US.
Including the United States. And then it will have negative impact on human beings, on marine life, on everything we can think of. Therefore, this is way beyond a decision by the Japanese government. This is way beyond just a consultation between Japan and the United States. I would urge that the United Nations Security Council immediately convene an urgent meeting involving the 5 permanent members as well as the 10 non-permanent members to address this issue right away, because this is exactly what the United Nations are set up for, and this is exactly what global dialogue need to talk about. Now, as far as the US government decision is concerned, I would say it's very much double standard, as you said.
Are we seeing US exactly it's another case of US pushing its political agenda above public good?
Yes, indeed. And also, the United States should not be allowed to hold itself out as the ultimate arbitrator of matters like this, because it can say it represents the United States, but does it really reflect the fundamental interest of the American people? Do the American people in California, in Oregon, or in the state of Washington really want to have contaminated nuclear wastewater washing up on their shore? Do you think the people in Hawaii really want to enjoy swimming anymore with such contaminated water washing up their shore? No, I don't think so. I don't think this decision by the US government represents the fundamental interest of the American people, and to the least, it doesn't represent all the littoral countries around the rim of the Pacific Ocean and the global community at large.
Do you think the Japan's dumping wastewater into the Pacific Ocean is actually violating the human rights of the whole world?
I would say if this decision is to be carried out, it would be one of the high crimes against humanity. Why? Because we cannot allow the Pacific Ocean to be contaminated by the wastewater. And this is not, for example, immediately a result of a tsunami or an earthquake. There will be time. There will be time, and I appeal to the Japanese government to immediately consider many other ways. For example, Japan can call for a littoral country meeting of the Pacific Ocean to address this issue, and also call on many other countries, including countries like China, South Korea, Germany, France, you name it, because these countries may have the technology, the expertise, manufacturing capacities that Japan may not have, and it will require a pooling of resources and talents and delivery capacities of all the international community to address a crisis like this. And if this decision is to be carried out, I think Japan will be held accountable for all the consequences, and I think it will be unfair to the Japanese people because this decision to be executed and implemented may ruin the Japanese fishery industry completely. So we are talking about we need to address the concerns, the legitimate concerns of all the stakeholders, rather than one or two entities.
This decision is harming everyone, including Japan, including the US. Then why is Japanese government making this decision? Japanese government said dumping the wastewater into the sea is the only option, is it?
No, I don't think so. I'm shocked by the fact that the Japanese government doesn't seem to have exhausted any resources. For example, it is not talking to countries like China, it's not talking to countries like Russia, two of the very important nuclear countries in the world. It's not talking to the United Nations as a whole. It's not talking to the G20 countries at all. It's treating this as a secret. It's treating this as only a matter relevant to Japan and the United States or IAEA.
Do you see the necessity of Japan talking to those organizations?
Absolutely. I think it's
because apart from US, EU and IAEA actually are also supporting Japan's decision.
That's not the totality of the story. I think this decision, if implemented, will impact on the 7.5 billion people completely. It will impact on all the littoral countries around the Pacific Ocean, and eventually...
Then why are EU and IAEA and some other NGOs are keeping silent?
I think we need to have complete transparency. We need to see all the correspondence between the Japanese government on the one hand and the IAEA on the other hand. We know for the recent decades, the Director General of IAEA has been very long been a Japanese national. And Japan has very good, long-standing good relations with IAEA. But I think this matter is way beyond the authority of the IAEA. At least it will trigger a close review by the Security Council of the United Nations. And I think we are running out of time. We need to make the appeal directly to Japan, directly to IAEA, directly to the United Nations Security Council, directly to all the littoral countries around the Pacific Ocean. We can no longer waste any time. Action is the most important thing right now.
Yes, but one last very quick question. If Japan will dump the water in 2 years, once it has done that, what measures can be taken?
Well, I think it will trigger a lot of litigations. Individuals, companies, for example, countries, etc. Japan may be buried by this tsunami of litigation going forward because it will impact on the livelihood of not only this generation of the people, but future generations. And you are not talking about 1 or 2 generations, you're talking about potentially 10 or 100 generations because the nuclear wastewater is not a small potato. It will not just happen and disappear, for example, without a trace. No. I think the Japanese people need to step up and the Japanese government need to step up to the plate and treat this as a very rare occasion where Japan as a country, Japanese people as a nation, and Japanese government need to demonstrate the full amount of wisdom, courage, and vision to do an international campaign to pool the resources of everyone involved to find a better solution. There must be a better solution. I don't believe dumping the wastewater into the Pacific Ocean is the best thing that mankind of today can do. No.
Of course not. Maybe one of the worst. All right. Thank you very much, Victor Gao Chair Professor at Soochow University. Thanks for your insights.
Thank you very much. Thank you.